The NASCAR All Star Race is an event that has had its fair share of moments and memories rivaled by so few on the tour. Who could forget one hot night? Kyle Petty and Davey Allison going door to door, going for it all without giving an inch. Who could forget the incident that did not get the Busch brothers to talk to each other until Thanksgiving? And of course, who could forget Ryan Newman, Jeff Gordon, and Kyle Busch not giving a single inch of real estate, going 3 wide, balls to the walls in 2009. In its heyday, the NASCAR All Star Race was the one race that you had circled on your calendar, along with big marquee events such as the Daytona 500 and the Coca Cola 600. Now, it's genuinely one of, if not the worst weekend of the entire year. I do not exaggerate when I'm saying this, as the All Star Race has fallen off a cliff in the past decade. NRF Productions proudly presents why NASCAR's All Star Race is no longer special. Now, the idea of being a NASCAR All-Star has been a questionable label since its inception in 1985. This race started out as an appetizer to Charlotte's Memorial Day weekend main course, that of course being the Coca Cola 600. Called the Winston, it was a 70-lap, one pit stop duel between the 12 race winners of the 1984 season. The name the Winston would stick with this event until Winston's forced departure from the sport after 2003, where the race would get the name it is best known as and the one it is being used today. The NASCAR All Star Race. Derived from stick and ball sports, the All Star Race in many ways does not make sense for motorsports. In baseball, hockey, football, and basketball, the All Star game is as advertised. It is the best players in the National League playing on the same team and against the best players in the American League. Or for hockey, for example, they have 4 divisions and they all play each other in a tournament style bracket to determine the winner of the ultimate prize. These games are a once-a-year event where you get to see star players from division rivals play as teammates, unless we're talking about the 2020 NHL All-Star Game when an all-St. Louis Blues team squared off against the All-Stars from the Pacific. And you can already see why the idea of a NASCAR All-Star Race sounds downright silly. Technically, every race is the NASCAR All-Star Race. These are the world's best stock car drivers that are traveling cross-country 36 weekends a year to showcase their craft. Now, I will give NASCAR and Brian France some major credit. Yes, I'm going to credit and give some praise to Brian France, even though he has pretty much ruined the sport in many ways since he took over. As for the longest time, the All-Star Race worked solely off of its eligibility. The All-Star Race used to be limited to past season winners as well as champions and event winners in the past decade, plus the open winner and the fan vote. NASCAR in the 1990s and the 2000s, they were strict on who made this race. They had some prestige to it, and that meant there were some big names that would miss the cut. When you think of Carl Edwards and Clint Bowyer in 2007, you think winners and chase contenders. One title they cannot claim for that season is All-Stars. Heck, for 2011 and 2012, this is hard to believe, but Dale Earnhardt Jr., the son of Dale Earnhardt, had to race his way into the big show through the showdown because his eligibility via the All-Star win expired, and he was in the midst of his long and frustrating points race drought. The major headlines of this being, would Dale Earnhardt Jr. race his way in, or would he have to fall back on the fan vote and his devoted, passionate Junior Nation to once again bail out his lack of performance? But of course, with this whole ordeal, NASCAR was playing with fire, because if Dale Earnhardt Jr. blew a tire, if he blew an engine, had some issue during the showdown, they were risking the main driver, the most popular driver, not being in the main event. So now we flash forward today, where basically if you win a championship or an All-Star Race at any point in your career, you are set for life. In addition to every race winner from both 2021 and 2022, plus the Segment 1, Segment 2, and the Segment 3 winners. Through all of this, they added more drivers through the open or the segment races and the fan vote, even though there are not a lot of drivers that are outside the All-Star Race that have a big following. And I'd expect in the next couple of years, eligibility is going to expand potentially to if your name is Austin, if you drive a black colored car, and if your last name rhymes with hair. For stick and ball sports, the term All-Star is usually limited to only 1 or 2 players on a given team, or 0.3% of the entire league. In NASCAR, 2/3 of the entire field makes the All-Star Race. And I gotta say guys, there is just no longer prestige to becoming an all-star like it once was. Back when Scott Riggs raced his way through the Open in 2006, it was a huge deal. Not only did the team get a decent payday, but you gotta think they were in a prestigious, a cutthroat field. It was also a big motivator for this Evernham group. Remember, in 2006, they missed the Daytona 500. They missed the biggest race of the year. And so this right here was a race that the team could look in the mirror and say, we are capable of racing competitively in the NASCAR Cup Series with Jeff Gordon, with Dale Earnhardt Jr., and with Tony Stewart. Today, being an all-star is an expectation, and if you don't make it, if you're somehow in the 1/3 that do not make this race, honestly, who cares? There's always next week. After all, the NASCAR charter system basically assures that you're going to compete in every race, regardless if you're 1st or 31st in points. The prestige of being an NASCAR All-Star is just not there anymore. But that is far from the biggest fault in this race's star. That is far from the meat in this sandwich. Another area I want to take a look at is the paint schemes, because back in the 1990s and the 2000s, the primary paint scheme existed. It was common to see your favorite driver, whether it was Stewart, Labonte, or even Jimmy Spencer, run the same paint scheme for at least 2/3 of the season. It wasn't until the 1995 All Star Race that we began to see the special paint scheme. Dale Earnhardt and Richard Childress Racing created shockwaves in the NASCAR world by running this inverse silver and black Monte Carlo in 1995. For a fan base and for a NASCAR Cup Series that had only known Dale Earnhardt for either the Wrangler colors or obviously the yellow and blue number 2, so either that palette or the black, all black look with a little bit of silver at the bottom. This silver look was a pleasant surprise. It was something different for one of the intimidating drivers in this series. 2 years later, Jeff Gordon and Ray Evernham unloaded the T-Rex, a paint scheme that would go down in NASCAR history as one that would get banned by NASCAR because of its incredible performance and radical design. Plus, I mean, come on, the paint scheme, you got the red and the black, it was such a fantastic looking paint scheme. This would slowly become a race that had no boundaries paint scheme wise. They were not tied down to anything. Dale Earnhardt could drive a colorful car. Jeff Gordon and Kevin Harvick could both run inverted schemes of their recognizable primary paint jobs, and Jimmy Johnson could even run a different number. It was something exclusive to the All-Star Race and the All-Star Race only. Until everything changed with the 1-2 punch of the economic crisis that made the full season sponsor extremely rare in today's modern NASCAR, and the normalization of wrapped race cars. Teams did not have to go through the lengthy process of repainting the entire car, going through 1-2 days of this process, to now this situation where in 3 to 6 hours, Kevin Harvick can go from this baby blue mountain look of Busch to the black and orange toughness of Gear Wrench. Now this is something that has had a few positives, but in the long run this has had a lot more negatives on the NASCAR Cup Series. It has completely killed driver identity in this series. Kevin Harvick, once remembered for running the Good Wrench or Shell Pennzoil colors every single week, has not raced the same livery in 2 consecutive races all season. And that is why, honestly, modern NASCAR paint schemes, they do not feel special anymore. Do not get me wrong, there are plenty of great liveries nowadays, but none of them feel special. And that's because our dopamine receptors have been fried like a bucket of extra crispy with the abundance of newness unlike anything we've seen in NASCAR's history. And that has had a ripple effect on the NASCAR All Star Race, because it is not just this race that they run different paint schemes. Now it's every single week. Not to say this is the only javelin into the heart. In many ways, it is what the cameras have or haven't captured in the last couple of years that have added to the dolification of this race, this once in a blue moon event that is now stagnated and not special. Back in the 1990s through the early 2010s, speed really captured the magnitude of this race. Thousands of race fans screaming and jamming out to the Red Hot Chili Peppers as Chris Myers or Steve Burns introduced the All-Stars. The driver walks out in a different fire suit, tying into the different paint scheme, and there to greet him is his pit crew. In some years, they would throw Budweiser coolers and Aaron's hats to the fans. In other years, the team would push the car onto the grid, something that we do not see during typical driver intros, and this was something that really added to the novelty of this event. However, in recent years, television has not captured this atmosphere really at all. Now, for the All-Star Race, this is a Fox problem only, but as a whole, it ties into the theme that modern NASCAR broadcasting is trash. I'll go ahead and say it. 2020's Fox has been called out, which in some cases is fair, but in other cases, it's just reactionary crap from Twitter. 2020's NBC, on the other hand, gets pedestalized as the pinnacle of NASCAR broadcasting, when it too is far from its glory days and far from a good broadcast. Even then, these are just some of the bells and whistles on the tricycle, much like the $1 million ploy, racing for the bag of dough that this race has been marketed as since the beginning of time. Kyle Busch, Kevin Harvick, Chase Elliott, and Kyle Larson are all millionaires. Never again will they or their families have to worry about paying the rent or having Thanksgiving dinner without the turkey. So what made the NASCAR All Star Race one of the hottest tickets on the tour? What was the backbone that kept this race intriguing? To understand this craze, you have to look at the one thing that made the NASCAR All Star Race different from the other races, and how, in recent years, that gap has shrunk and has really ruined the All Star Race in the long run. Traditionally, NASCAR has been known as a marathon motorsport. This is not NHRA. This is not Formula One. NASCAR is 3+ hours of man versus machine. What driver can do the best job of jockeying a heavy stock car for 3+ hours with little intermission the best? The NASCAR All Star Race was the exception. Instead of the traditional 400, 500 mile race, this was a short, heat style event, typically run in stages of 20 to 30 laps, with the final 10 laps being a shootout for all the glory. There was no conserving your stuff, and you were pretty much running qualifying laps out there to get absolutely everything out of your car until the checkered flag or the end of the segment. It was that one race a year where you got to see NASCAR drivers out of their element, and there's no better example than with Matt Kenseth in 2004. At the time, he had built a reputation of being one of the most conservative drivers in the field. Most every week, he would race smart, he would race calculated, which helped him win the 2003 championship, but it did not win him a lot of races. And because of that, not a lot of fans thought he was a legitimate champion. As many argue that it should have been Ryan Newman, the guy that won 8 races, he should have been the one that won the title instead of Matt Kenseth. Well, for the NASCAR All Star Race in 2004, that next year, it was the 2 best drivers of 2003 duking it out for $1 million. How did it end, you ask? Conservative Matt Kenseth gives Ryan Newman a little tap that drifts him up the racetrack to silence the haters and to make as one of his most shocking wins of his NASCAR career. Matt Kenseth put everything on the line to win that race and the $1 million. This right here, guys, was what made people drive all the way out to Concord, North Carolina to buy a ticket and sell this place out consistently. That was the show. So what changed from 2003 to now? NASCAR's culture. Segmented racing is no longer exclusive to the All Star Race and the All Star Race only. In 2017, NASCAR adopted the stage racing format we all know and love today, all but eliminating the calculated approach to racing, even in a race like the Daytona 500. Remember 2018? Remember that race when Ryan Blaney and Ricky Stenhouse Jr. literally risked one of their prime chances to win the Daytona 500, one of the biggest races on the calendar. They put that on the line just for a couple freaking stage points. And this is why I've become more and more anti-stage racing over the past few years. Now, I genuinely like the idea of awarding teams points throughout the race, but at the expense of the natural flow of the race and a needless TV yellow. And to that I say no, I do not think we should be manufacturing breaks to appease a generation addicted to phones, fast food, and pornography. Back in the day, the All Star Race was the only event where you got to see heat-style sprints. Nowadays, that's every single week. And that is not the only thing, the only mentality that has shifted and opened up to more than just the All Star Race. When you go way back to when the All Star Race was added, NASCAR's point structure was completely different. In the 1990s to early 2010s, every point mattered, whether it was the traditional Winston format where it was a season-long structure, or the chase to get into the top 10 or top 12 in points. The NASCAR All Star Race was truly that one race where points did not matter. Contrast that with the qualifications to win the championship in 2022. To make the playoffs, all you have to do is win one race and finish in the top 30 in points. That's it. We've seen in the past guys like Chris Buescher, they were on 25th to 30th all season long, get that one lucky fog to affect the driver's vision, and just like that, they are competing for a championship along with the heavyweights because they have that one golden ticket to go to the postseason. And unless you're leading the regular season standings or you're in a tight battle for one of the 16 playoff spots, points do not matter. Give me one good reason, honestly, why Denny Hamlin and Kurt Busch should points race to get into the top 10 in the regular season standings. Give me one. Yeah, they might pick up 2 to 3 playoff points, but it makes much more logical sense to just go for broke every single week to instantly grab 5. This dumbed down checkers or wreckers style of racing has changed the way the drivers race, with the most clean-cut example being last month's Bristol Dirt Race. Chase Briscoe knew he wasn't going to make the corner, but he still pulled that Busch League move anyway because he knew his golden ticket to the playoffs was punched in week 4. If this were the old format, Briscoe would have had some restraint. Okay, I'm not going to make the corner, and this is likely going to cost me 10 to 12 points and my chance to make the championship. This right here could be the difference between making the chase or missing the chase after 26 regular season races. Instead, with this winning you're in format, he had the all-star race mentality and he decided to dive bomb Tyler Reddick, and then he went up to him with the "oh shucks, I'm sorry about that, I was just going for the win" attitude without reading the room. Briscoe's move and attitude at the end of this race was that of a guy with nothing to lose, and that is typically what you see out of the all-star race. It is a no points, no stake race, and if there is one thing I want you to take out of this video, it's the fact that NASCAR has ripped the heart and soul out of this event. Every race can be the all-star race now if you get that one win, and that has completely ruined this particular event, the NASCAR All Star Race. And in the last couple of years, NASCAR has tried so hard to compensate for this by testing out new rules. And in many ways, this race has been the guinea pig for long-term changes, i.e. the 550 package, the hood vents, and of course the number placement. None of these gimmicks have been able to hear the irreplaceable heart that was ripped out of this race. Honestly, there is really no point anymore to do the NASCAR All Star Race. Back in the day, the All Star Race was truly special. Nowadays, it's like every single race. Whether you're looking at the paint schemes, they change every single week. Whether you're looking at the field, as basically every single driver is locked in nowadays. And you look at the style of racing. Nowadays, this go for broke, segmented racing, we see that every single week. There is nothing special about the NASCAR All Star Race, and the only reason why it's here is to abide to the TV contract with NASCAR on Fox. I think when 2025 comes up, NASCAR needs to think long and hard about this race because in many ways, the All Star Race is not a special event anymore. So anyways, this is Nathan for NRF Productions signing out, and just remember guys and gals, life's a beach and then you drive.